Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of That's Business Podcast. Today's guest is one of the most fascinating people I've ever met, Matt Towers. Now, Matt lost just over 90 pounds back in 2010. He did so alongside his wife, who also lost 75 pounds, with their 6 and 3-year-old daughters in tow. Though working with the weight loss transformed him physically, his mindset also shifted dramatically, which helped him start to lead a life filled with more joy and contentment. These days, even though Matt has a satisfying day job, he has multiple side hustles, which include health and mindset coaching, marketing consulting, and playing poker. As a coach, his goal is to help others who feel a need to make lasting, healthy changes to their lives, but don't know how. Matt, thank you so much for being here, and I'm so excited to do this episode.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So first and foremost, I always like to start, how did you get into all of this? What got you to this point today?
Just a slightly long answer coming here. There's a lot
You're
I could
ready for
say.
it.
There's a lot I could say. What got me here? Well, I mean, the weight loss transformation got me into the right place mentally, where I could begin to get into a place where I could just be more authentic of a
Sure.
person to myself, have more self-confidence. But I mean, as far as things like what got me to a point where I've got side hustles and a day job, and
Right.
I mean, I'm probably not that much of a unicorn as it relates to the pandemic. Made me rethink a lot of things. I mean, a lot of people
Yes.
went through this sort of, questioning of the path they were on, and for me, it was very much, I was working a day job when the pandemic started, had been working from home. So the transition I was very fortunate. It was a pretty seamless transition for me. But then I just started, every day blends together when you're working
Yep.
from home. And I just started to kind of think, like, what do I want to spend my time doing?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of led me to to actually act on something that had been festering inside of me for probably 4 years,
Wow.
which was the health and life coaching certification.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm not kidding. 4 years prior to when I actually signed up for the certification program, I signed up for their newsletter. I had the company is called Health Coach Institute, and I just had this feeling inside of me, like, I really think this kind of work is meaningful, and I have lived through my own transformation, and so I think I can
Right.
connect with people and be absolutely um, legitimate. Like, they're going to see me and they're going to see what I accomplished, and they're going to be like, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's lived it.
Right.
But then I just sort of sat on those feelings. I sat on them for like 4 years, and every once in a while I'd be like, I should do that. I should do that. And I finally decided to. There's a
Mm-hmm.
bit more to that,
Of course.
why or how I got to decide to, because it involves how I got involved with poker and why I even consider it to be a side hustle and not just a hobby. But long story short, I ended up getting enrolled in that certification course
Mm-hmm.
and developed a relationship with a poker professional for whom I do marketing consulting now. And what's funny is these things happen because I was willing to take the risk and just try to do them. I'm
Right.
willing to take the risk and put myself out there and make something happen. And so here I am. I have a very full life and no complaints.
I want to dissect each piece of everything that you have going on because all of it was fascinating. And I think the first time we talked, I'm like, excuse me, is there anything else you don't do? And for those that are listening to this and not watching the video, Matt also has about 5 different instruments behind him right now because he also leads a whole team as well and has a worship team that he does teach and does all of this. So wildly fascinating man, right? So back to 2010, what made you kind of identify like, hey, I need to have a life change? I know you said kind of going through the motions. The pandemic made you change that, but what happened in 2010 for you?
Well, the pandemic made me change my outlook on what it meant to have a career and what kind of retirement meant. And we can
Right.
talk about that in a minute, but to your question, what happened to me in 2010?
Yes.
So back then, if I put myself back in 2010. I have two small children,
Right.
and I'm kind of a hot mess in 2010. I really am. I mean, I was massively overweight,
Hmm.
obese, really. Um, at the time in 2010, by then I had actually moved into a job that I liked, but prior to that, I was doing inside sales, and even though I look back at the 3 years that I did inside sales as being extremely valuable to my career because of
Right.
the things I learned, when I was in the moment, it was really difficult, and I questioned myself and my abilities a lot. So in 2010, I was at sort of this point where I'd already gone to some extent into a real rock bottom,
Hmm.
where my weight issues were causing health problems,
Oh, wow.
not just knee, like my knees were getting sore, not just stuff like that, but I had developed sleep apnea,
Hmm.
and I'd gone into an actual sleep study because my wife is like, you got to get checked out. You're scaring the crap out of me at night. Like your breathing is like crazy, weird sounding. And lo and behold, when I went in for the sleep study, they said, yep, according to our tests here, you stopped breathing 67 times over the course of however many hours. I think it was like 5.5 or 6 hours.
That's
So I
scary.
got put on a CPAP,
Hmm.
which I don't even know what CPAP stands for. All I can tell you is it's terrible. It's awful because you have to sleep with this mask
The
on.
mask on, right?
And if it slips off, then in the middle of the night, all of a sudden it's like just like really loud blasting sound. And I just, as I'm living this existence where I'm like, I don't feel great, I'm not sleeping great, I
Right.
just sort of got pissed off, Angela. Like,
Hmm.
I'm just sick of feeling like this. And I got to a point where I'm like, there's nothing special about me. There's no reason why I can't lose weight. Who am I kidding? Like, other people have figured this out.
Right.
So, the first thing I decided to do was I got to change how I think because I'm sort of just wallowing and negative, and so I did. I actually found this CD by a guy named Dr. Alan Zimmerman, and he still actually is a mindset coach and a success coach. And I got this CD as kind of a peripheral from a work-related event that I attended, and I found it.
Hmm.
And the title of it is 10 surefire ways to become a more positive person. So when I saw that, I'm like, well, wow, like
Wow. Why
this is
not? Right.
kismet that I found this. This is what I need to be listening to. And so I popped it into my car back when, CDs were the
CD
way you
players, right?
listen to things in a
Yeah.
car. And I listened to it over and over again. It's about a 60-minute recording. And I mean, I must have listened to that thing 100 times. I listened to it over
Wow.
and over again for 4 or 5 months. Nothing else, didn't listen to music, and assimilated the content. And so this was probably 2009 when that
Okay.
actually happened, when I found the CD and started listening to it. And so 2010 rolls around. My wife finds this program that's being run through the local school rec and ed program about, it's called Lose It Fast, Lose It Forever.
Hmm.
And we noticed, hey, like the person who's running this is actually was a former contestant on The Biggest Loser, and
Oh,
actually was
cool.
like the
Okay.
most successful at home player in the history of the game. Lost like 185 pounds after he got kicked off the ranch. Um,
Wow.
anyway, she took his class in January. Uh, was kind of raving like, wow, this is like legit. Like, here's a framework. Here's like really how to do this. Meanwhile, I'm still just eating whatever's in sight, not doing anything. But
Hmm.
I'm thinking differently.
Right.
And so I'm kind of preparing myself. I'm like, all right, when June rolls around and the next course opens up, I'm going to take it. So I did. And so all of a sudden, I'm presented with this wealth of knowledge from somebody who lost a ton of weight, who basically laid out a blueprint. Like, this is what you got to do. These are the things you have to pay attention to,
Hmm.
etc. And what's cool is for the first 4 months, 3 months or so, I didn't do anything dramatic in terms of my activity level. All I did was I paid attention to what I was eating and I took it seriously. And the awareness alone, Angela, was unbelievable. I realized when one of the things I had to do was I had to take a look at what am I eating,
Right.
and I just catalog it. And as I looked at what I'm eating, I'm like, well, it's no wonder I'm so heavy. I'm eating absolute garbage here. And so I took the time to just make different decisions. It was nothing. It was there was sort of incremental steps I took to changing my diet, where a lot of it was simply real quick and dirty rules. Like rule number one: do not drink your calories, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And
Smart.
so cut out the pop, cut out all the stuff, like all the extras that we love to throw into our coffees or whatever, and just drink water all the
Mm-hmm.
time, or tea, and maybe some coffee, but don't put anything in it.
Right.
And so it's like some of these real simple to follow rules, they made a big difference. And then once I actually started to get into an exercise boot camp, then the pounds just really started to fly off. And that was it. Like I had to work on that mindset first, but by the time I got to the point where I started learning about how to lose weight,
Mm-hmm.
I had already planted all the seeds in my head. And when I tell people how easy it was to lose 90 pounds, they're like, how can that be easy? But I mean, I wasn't working against myself mentally.
Right.
My mind was focused on the right things, and the momentum was very easy to create and maintain because I did all that mindset work beforehand.
So, with the clients you work with, for my next question, what is the biggest problem? Because having this like health coaching side of you, this life coaching side that goes hand in hand, like you're saying, what is the biggest hurdle your clients have to get over? What you see often happen?
Well, it's interesting. Life coaching, it's almost a misunderstood term, I think. I'm not sure if people always understand it. I think you can interchange mindset and life because a lot of life is simply
100%.
mindset,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
The biggest obstacle that I see, most people they really kind of suck at taking care of themselves. And what I mean by that isn't so much, it's more of a mindset around it. They put other people first. They don't they don't put self-care as a priority.
Priority. Mm-hmm.
And so they burn the candle at both ends. So you see it with people who are workaholics, and they don't take the time to just slow down a bit and enjoy some of the small but real meaningful things in life. So I think that's probably the biggest obstacle, especially in our culture. You know, this whole YOLO culture where it's like you got to go 100 miles an hour and whatnot. I think
Hustle culture too.
we
Yeah.
miss, yeah, we miss out on so much of the joy from what's simple about life. The joy of something. I mean, I'm just going to say, like, the joy of enjoying a a nice meal, for instance. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, how many people are scarfing their meal down at their desk at work? You know what I mean? And hey, you don't have to raise your hand, but I'll bet you you
Me.
will be,
Everything
yeah,
you're
you will be
saying is
that person.
me.
You will be that person sometimes, and I am that person
Right.
sometimes. But for a lot of people, that's just the norm. And that like that ability to just step away from the crazy and the fray and realize I got to take care of myself. So it's sort of it's they aren't good at that, and then for some people it's really uncomfortable and weird, and it makes them feel like they're being selfish almost to do things that are self-care related. Um,
You're like calling me out here on all these things here. I didn't know this is what I'm like. Oh, oh crap! This is me.
I
This is me.
hear
This is
this.
me.
I hear this from a lot of people.
Mhm.
It's very much a challenge to find the right balance because there is too much. There is too much leisure. There can be too much of the taking it easy where people sort of lose their edge and
Right.
they're not. And so it's a mindset thing, right? It's realizing I'm going to go to bed early tonight and I'm going to put my phone down and not look at it because I want to honor myself. I want to honor the fact that rest matters and I need rest. And that's not what I just said is not easy. I'll bet you most people listening have a hard time putting their phone down at night when they get into bed. And it's just one of those habits a lot of people have created.
Right.
But I'm telling you, that like honoring rest, honoring sleep, honoring how you just the whole idea of your body as a temple.
Hmm.
Um, we we unfortunately, I think, generally speaking, just don't do that enough. and that's it.
What are some easy tips? Because, like I said, these are all things my friends, my family say the same thing I do. But what are some easy tips for people to get started? Because it's not just like a, hey, I'm just going to implement this tomorrow and I'm going to immediately change. But what are some easy, simple tips people can do, like putting your phone down at night? What are some other ones?
Well, most people don't drink nearly enough water. That's
Hmm.
one I would say is really good for your health. Um, Take a walk outside. I mean, there's just something about getting fresh air, and we're getting, at this time, like it's April as we're talking right now. It's right in that
Right.
right time of the year where going outside isn't terrible, not
It's
usually.
not yet, right?
So get outside. But I do encourage, I mean, one of the things as a coach that I really help people with is healthy change is incremental.
Hmm.
And so not doing too much at once is really important because the part of you that wants to resist change is just going to sabotage yourself if you start changing too many things. And so it's a good question to ask of what's an easy thing, what's a small thing, because those are the things that matter. In fact, that's how a meaningful, long-lasting change even happens, is when you start to accumulate a bunch of the small, subtle things that aren't hard to do over the course of time.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, drinking water. I think I mentioned one of my mantras that I learned: don't drink your calories. If
Right.
you can just, pop is just, there's nothing redeemingly good about it. It might taste good for like 10 seconds, but that's like it. And the
Right.
list of cons is much longer. Um, but that's a hard one for some people. So you can always find a way to kind of progress yourself. So if the cutting cold turkey is too hard, maybe just cut down to one a day, or maybe try something you don't mind in a diet. But the point is, make something incremental happen that's in the
Hmm.
right direction, and it can get easier over the course of time.
Right. One baby step can lead to incremental steps long term. Now,
That's right.
what does it look like working with you? Because you are absolutely right. Every life coaching has kind of become this buzzword, as I'm seeing that with like career, any coaching, honestly, with like the rise in social media and everything, and everyone claims to be a coach when they're not. But what does it look like working with you?
Well, with me, I set the ground rules right away that really the this is the ultimate responsibility is on you. So it might sound funny, like, hey, you want to hire me as a coach? Guess what? You have the ultimate responsibility in this relationship. But the reality is, a good coach isn't prescriptive. So I'm not going to be sitting here rifling off, you need to be doing this, 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 and this.
Hmm.
When you work with me, I make an effort to really ask tough questions
Hmm.
and to get you thinking differently about your situation. And a lot of people, it's amazing when I get to talking to people, how often I can pick up on what their default inner voice is like, what their default inside language is like. And you know what I mean by inside
Yes.
language? It's
Like
that part
internal
of you,
dialogue.
yeah, the internal
Yes.
dialogue. And people are really hard on themselves, and their
Hmm.
default is to say negative things. I mean, if I were to ask you on a call, so tell me how your week has gone. If I don't frame it and say, tell me something good that happened this week, if I just leave it open ended, guess what kinds of stuff people usually bring up?
Always negative.
They do. They say, well, I didn't
Right.
get to bed early enough here, or I couldn't put my phone down. And it's kind of like, cut yourself a break. There are things to celebrate. So I will make an effort. When you work with me, I make an effort to make sure we are celebrating any win, the smallest of wins, because those are the sorts of things that help build momentum. I also introduce new concepts, and I kind of go through certain coaching sequence that can help people in terms of personal growth. Like I said, thinking about their situation differently,
Hmm.
thinking forward to the person they want to be, and sort of going through this progression with them to help them get there. So in many ways, they're, like I said, they're doing the work. They're the ones that um, are making the changes.
Right.
I'm helping them with a realistic framework and a realistic progression that can get habit changes to happen. Um, And it's one thing I always remind people of. Wherever you are right now, there are two
Hmm.
things that are true about that. Thing number one, you did not get the way you are overnight either. So to
Right.
expect ultimate results within a week or two isn't realistic. The other thing too is that when you can embrace the idea that, hey, look, I am exactly where I need to be and exactly who I need to be right now in this moment. When I'm coaching somebody and working with somebody, they weren't probably ready for that until that moment, until they said, I want to work with you, or I want to improve myself somehow. And knowing that and having a piece of saying, I'm going to let go of whatever maybe guilt or negative emotions I might have around how I got where I am. The fact is, hey, look, I'm here now. I'm ready to move forward and have a forward thinking mindset about it. And I help with that.
Hmm. Well, and that's with any coaching. I mean, even me doing career coach, and it's so funny you bring that up because career coaching, any type of LinkedIn coaching, any type of coaching, you can't do the work for them because it's going to resort back to old habits. But when you're helping people, it all goes back to mindset. Same thing with resume writing and LinkedIn and everything I do is it's all mindset. So you do help people see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I preach the same thing is why do you always go negative? Okay, what if I don't get the job? What if I don't get a call back? What if I can't close a client? Okay, well, what if you do get the job? What if you do get a call back? What if you do, close the clients and then some? It's so crazy how hard people are on themselves. And it took me, I don't know, 2 or 3 years to really find my own confidence and feeling that. I mean, and I know you and I have talked about this before of confidence doesn't happen overnight, but if you can kind of nip it in the butt, for lack of a better term, of wow, this negative energy is just eating at me and eating at me and eating at me, it's such a world of a difference where you kind of can push down that imposter syndrome. You can, have that confidence that can lead to better life, work life balance, life satisfaction, health and wellness, like you. I mean, I love that. Okay. I want to change the topic a little more to the poker side of you. Now,
Okay.
what made you get into poker? Because I know you said it kind of came into mindset. So how do all of these pieces, these facets of you all come together?
How did I get into poker? This
Yes.
is something that it initially happened, my goodness, back in the early to mid 2000s. A buddy
Okay.
of mine invited me to a poker tournament that his dad was hosting.
Hmm.
And there were like 50 people there roughly, and I ended up taking second place. And I was like, wow, like I really enjoyed the strategy behind it. In
Hmm.
fact, strategic games in general are a thing that that's one of my things. I
Yes.
love strategic games. I got a board game room with literally a couple hundred board games of all sorts of flavors. So I love strategic games, and poker to me is one of the ultimate strategic games because you're talking about this game where you have to make decisions with limited information. You have missing information, and you have to deduce what the right play is, what the right decisions are.
Right.
And you want to try to induce the wrong decisions and wrong plays from your opponents. So you're kind of doing this dance the whole time. And so when I got that bug from playing poker in that tournament, this was not that far removed from when online poker started to get going. In fact, Texas Hold'em got really popular in the mid 2000s for a while. And there were a whole bunch of these online sites, and I played for a while. But then
Hmm.
eventually, the U.S. government shut those down. I think in 2010 or 2009. And so I just sort of said, okay, well, that part of my life's over for now. And it wasn't really until um, a few months into the pandemic that a friend of mine invited me into a poker home game. And the home game got moved to an app because nobody was getting together. But these guys
Right.
wanted to try to find a way to continue to, blow off steam, have fun, play poker, and maybe just chat in the app and so forth instead of talking smack in real face to face
Right.
and all that stuff. And so he invited me in, and when I got in, it kind of rekindled my love for the game. And I realized, like, a lot's changed about poker. I need to study this game because I want to be as good as I can.
Hmm.
And this is something about me, Angela. When I get my mind on something like this, I obsess. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, there was a point in time in my life where I was like really into fantasy football, and I
Hmm.
was so competitive. I'm probably the only person that owns a book about fantasy football. Like, that's how into this I am,
I
or
didn't even
was, I
know they
should say.
made such books. That's a
They
book on
make them
fantasy
for
football.
people like me who
Okay.
obsess. And so I kind of got this strategy, but the
Right.
problem is I get this mindset of, okay, now I have all this knowledge. I have to go maximize my ROI. I need to go out there. So I was in like 7 leagues, and so I just sort of burnt
7?
myself out on it. I was.
Oh,
So I burnt myself out on it, but I got really good at it.
right.
And I got to a point where I was like competing for a championship regularly. So I'm really only in one fantasy football league now. But to go back to poker though, that I bring that story up because I kind of got into that mode of I want to learn. And
Hmm.
so there's a ton of free stuff online. So I'm kind of poking around, looking at different sites and so forth. And a different friend of mine that hosts some poker nights at his house, he just mentioned to me, "Hey, I found this interesting this guy who does poker videos. I think you might like his stuff." And so I went out into YouTube and I checked it out, and like, wow, he really thinks through his hands in an interesting way. I've never heard someone talk this way, and he focuses more on live cash poker. And
Okay.
so I signed up for his subscription service based on what I saw from his free content, and I started absorbing the content, and I'm just like, wow, this is so good. And it's giving me so many of these things that I can apply at the poker table that I never had thought of before. And it just gave me this framework for thinking about poker hands and for thinking about what decisions I would make and why I would make them. And it to the point where I I was never really surprised at the table. No matter what happened, I had a plan.
Hmm.
And it just that it unlocked a lot for me, and it made the game that much more enjoyable because I felt like I really understood the game and I could just make optimal decisions. And it got me to a point where I stopped getting all angry and upset if I didn't win, because at least I knew I was making the right decisions. So
That's so interesting. I after I you told me about that, I've never thought of how poker is a mind game because I play my free version on my phone, Texas Hold'em, love it. But I see the mindset. I'm like, well, you're betting, so I'm gonna bet, even though I don't have a good hand, but you're betting, so I'm gonna bet. But I swear, so it's so funny that you say that. Now, how? Because I know we talked about part of your mindset coaching around that is, poker players too. How is that different than your other maybe health and wellness, day to day clients you work with?
well, I can tell you how it's different, because having had success at the poker table myself, I think I can bring that to the table, no pun intended. But
Love it.
I mean, in the course of, I gotta think about how much time it's been,
Hmm.
maybe 20 months, not quite 2 years, I guess, that I've been really more invested in playing poker. I've probably won $60,000 playing poker, which is insane. Like, I never would have thought, like, wow, like, how can I be doing this? And um, I like to even think of it as an income source or as a steady income source is weird. But the reality is, I got to a point where um, it just became reliable to some extent. And so I can bring that aspect, but I can also bring the aspect of you got to balance your life. You have to be looking at this and you have to figure out what are your goals around it.
Right.
And I think that's like understanding what those goals are and how does that fit into the person that you want to be in the first place. Like, so it's really, there's a lot of context, I guess, around it, Angela. It's not just, it's mindset coaching, and
Right.
it's helping people understand how to be successful in that specific area of their lives. So, I mean, how it's different maybe is just simply because of the background I have, but there's a lot of similarities. I mean, when you look at any whether it's career or relationship challenges, any place people feel stuck, it kind of boils down to those things. Like, what do you want? And that's not an easy question for some people to answer. Is what do you really want to get out of life? Like, what are your goals? Many people don't think about those things, and they just kind of go through the motions. But to think about them in a productive way, then you can start to look at, well, what role do I want poker to have in my life? What relationships do I want to prioritize in my life? And you can start to be more deliberate with how you live.
That's amazing. You're true. Everyone goes through the motions. You don't really like live a full life, or it's just it's it's something, I swear. But amazing. Okay. Any and what is a fun fact about you as we close up this conversation? You've provided so many insightful tips. So, well, I guess first and foremost, how do people find you? And I want a fun fact about you because you have millions of fun facts about you.
Well, okay, how to find me. You can find me at matttowers.coach. I wasn't even aware that .coach was a thing.
I didn't either. I was like,
which
oh,
made me
okay.
laugh. But yeah, .coach is a thing out there in the interwebs, so you can go find me.
First.
Right, matttowers.coach. So that's how you can find me. And a fun fact about me, I mean, you alluded to the kind of musical setup behind me. So I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I can play bass, guitar, drums, piano, and I have played all of those things at one point in time publicly. I actually, gosh, I've been playing music since I can remember. My parents were both in a band, and so we always had instruments around in the basement, and just have an ear and a feel for it. And I feel very blessed to have music in my life.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on this podcast. It was so much fun, a lot of insightful tips. And for those of you listening, the links will be in the bio for on this episode summary of how you can find Matt, and tune in next week for our next episode.
If you're looking for a career change and you're not sure where to start, the Resume Rescue can help. Sure, there's no such thing as the perfect fit for everyone, but here at the Resume Rescue, we're on a mission to find the perfect solution for you. Whether it's changing careers, updating a resume, learning LinkedIn, or practicing interviewing, we have you covered. Find us online at theresumerescue.com and find all of our contact info in our show notes.